Hi. In the chapter on Christian Science in Karel von Baalen's The Chaos of Cults, we did the brief biography last time. This time, the therapeutic fruits of Christian Science. The Powell biography of Mrs. Eddy contains a chapter, By Their Fruits, and we are willing that Eddyism be judged by its fruits. These fruits are not wholly evil. If they were, the system could not have survived as it has. The good that is to the credit of Eddyism lies in the many cures it has effected. These demonstrate the power of mind over matter, and it is all to the good that Mrs. Eddy, together with numerous other faith healers and mental healers, has called attention to this power. Medical science is, perhaps more than it likes to admit, indebted to Mrs. Eddy for the rediscovery of the all-important interaction between the physical and the spiritual in man. Psychosomatic troubles have been recognized mostly in the wake of Christian Science. Now, he has two footnotes to that praise. He says, the difference between the two categories in general is that the former direct the mind to an outside, supposedly divine power, which heals in answer to prayer, whereas the latter hold that the human mind itself is capable of reasoning away sickness. Both, however, presuppose receptivity of mind. And then W. Sweet, in his admirable study, The Story of Religion in America, similarly suggests, and perhaps the growing interest in psychiatry as a new technique is not unrelated to Christian Science. Back to von Baalen. He says, however, alongside of the little good that Eddyism has accomplished, we must place the great evil it has wrought. First, Mrs. Eddy, as well as her numerous followers, have repeatedly made claims that could not be substantiated. Not only have they refused to be guided by competent diagnosis, as do all faith healers, but they have claimed the ability to heal when such ability was totally lacking. In brief, Christian Science cannot remove organic troubles. Mrs. Eddy herself reluctantly granted the feasibility of calling in surgical help. One of the unsubstantiated claims made by Mrs. Eddy was, quote, I healed the malignant tubercular diphtheria and carious bones that could be dented by the finger, saving them when the surgeon's instruments were lying on the table ready for their amputation. I healed at one visit a cancer that had so eaten the flesh of the neck as to expose the jugular vein so that it stood out like a cord. Unquote. The official Christian Science literature would have us believe that Mrs. Eddy repeatedly raised those who had been held in the clutches of death. Such preposterous claims can be multiplied many times from Mrs. Eddy's own writings. Second, there is a large amount of literature dealing with authentic cases in which Christian Science practitioners were condemned by the United States courts for needlessly causing deaths by their refusal to call in medical and surgical aid. Reports of these cases may be found in books available in public libraries, if not in Christian Science reading rooms. Third, whether Mr. Eddy died of ordinary physical ailments or of arsenic poison mentally administered, as Mrs. Eddy asserted, the fact remains that Mrs. Eddy was not able to cope with the results of the evil forces, the reality of which she denied. The same is true of the practitioners who have followed after her. At best, they have attributed the results of evil forces to error of mortal mind, which apparently proved too strong for omnipotent good to remove it. In spite of her denial of the existence of the devil, Mrs. Eddy was, in her old age, to an unusual degree, driven to mortal fear by that real devil of her system, which she was pleased to call malicious animal magnetism. MAM stands for unkind and hostile thoughts directed against one. MAM, malicious animal magnetism, has become the nightmare of Christian Science and is the real devil of this devil-denying philosophy. Now the philosophy of Christian Science. Eddyism is first of all the result of Mrs. Eddy's quest for physical health. When she thought she had found this for herself through P.P. Quimby, she thought to find it for others through influencing their minds against the existence of their physical troubles. Over a period of years, she developed the system that has spread over parts of the United States and Canada and many other lands. Christian Science's influence has remained limited largely to urban communities and to the prosperous middle class. This can be seen in Seattle, for instance, where the 18th Church of Christ Scientist was officially dedicated on the Sunday after Easter, April 5, 1959. It matters not whether this system originated with Quimby or with Mrs. Eddy, whether it goes back to 1862 or to 1866. Mrs. Eddy certainly went beyond Mesmer, Poyen, and Quimby, although the finished product contains elements found in their systems and elements strongly reminiscent of Shakerism, hypnotism, philosophical idealism, and perhaps of other systems of thought that were popular in her day and environment. The final product, however, went beyond any and all of these, in that it became, and is now, what has been called precisely a cosmic pantheism, that all that and nothing but that. That's the words of B.B. Warfield in Miracles Yesterday and Today. Since Mrs. Eddy was essentially a poorly educated and self-made woman who dealt with problems far beyond her ken, her book, the now notorious Science and Health, is hopelessly confused. From the first to the last edition, it contains a mass of confused ideas. Its popularity is to no small degree due to the fact that the confused and endlessly repetitious statements leave with certain readers the impression of great profundity. Intelligent readers, of course, detect her rare taste for illogical rambling and harping upon one single thought. Mrs. Eddy did, however, face grave difficulties in maintaining her one single idea in the face of the facts of a largely material universe. Few pantheists would go to the length Mrs. Eddy went to. She held that since God is all, and God is omnipotent good, therefore all that is not God simply has no objective reality. And since she could not deny that evil in its many spiritual and physical forms surrounds us on every hand, Mrs. Eddy found herself forced to postulate something she called mortal mind, which exists, she maintained, in opposition to God and good. This mind is filled with error, and to it must be attributed all apparent evil. Since evil is mental, it must be reasoned away. It must be silenced by divine mind. That there is actually no room for such an erroneous mortal mind in a theory that postulates the existence of a good and omnipotent God to the exclusion of all evil is the one stubborn fact that destroys the entire philosophy of Christian Science. The practical difficulty Christian Science encounters here lies in the fact that even Mrs. Eddy herself was not so filled with science as to be able to demonstrate the non-existence of evil, sorrow, pain, and death. Man in his present condition is able to reason away only certain diseases and evils. To the end of his earthly career, he remains subject to the tyranny of mortal mind. Only ultimately will mankind be able to demonstrate the truthfulness of Mrs. Eddy's one fundamental thought, that God and truth and health and opulence are the one only reality. It is this grudgingly acknowledged fact that first makes all Christian Science literature so difficult to understand by non-initiated, and second, plagued Mrs. Eddy grievously with her lifelong mortal fear of MAM. What was MAM again? Malicious animal magnetism. And that third prompted a well-known doctor of philosophy of a generation ago to accuse Mrs. Eddy of, quote, the trick of two languages, unquote, stating that the key to Christian Science and the understanding of its textbook lies in the recognition of the fact that the same words are used with two different meanings, the one that of science and the other that of mortal mind. Dr. Snowden has summed up the popular appeal of Christian Science in a concluding chapter under the following headings. First, the appeal of health. Second, the appeal of comfort. Third, the appeal of idealism. Fourth, the appeal of liberal revolt. And Dr. Snowden adds, though Christian Science is a pretentious and fallacious system of philosophy that has no standing or respect in the schools, yet this very aspect of it has been an attraction for a certain type of unschooled and superficial mind. The vague, mystic ideas, the strange doctrines, the claim and appearance of being a new revelation, the peculiar catchwords and phrases of its jargon, and especially the great, swelling, sonorous polysyllables, even such uncouth words as allness and somethingness, and the rolling, reverberating sentences have a kind of hypnotic effect, fascinating and attracting minds not given to careful attention and reflective thought, as bright electric lights attract swarms of summer flies and moths. That's Snowden's book, The Truth About Christian Science. Next time, Christian Science as a Religion. I'll put in a link to 5 characteristics of cultic groups, a booklet we've got on our website called Slaves of Men, 5 characteristics of cultic groups. See you next time.